I hope everybody's enjoyed this amazing panel that the team put together, or the amazing day, I should say. You've covered a lot of territory, and what we want to do in the last session, and I readily acknowledge that we are standing between you and cocktails, so we will get right down to it, is really to focus on next steps, call to action. The team here is really the folks you're going to hear from today. So I would, I guess, Nancy, turn it over to you in terms of, should we just go down the line in terms of what everybody thinks the next steps and call to action should be?
Sure. I'm going to ask Mitch to kick off this conversation. He
Okay.
has some talking points we put together that kind of summarizes the overall, and then we can throw it open. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's your show.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. When I introduced this symposium, or started the symposium this morning, I mentioned we would get back together this afternoon to talk about sort of what the next steps are, and what certainly Nancy and my vision was when we were sitting down one fateful afternoon and came up with the concept of actually raising the awareness of the market in general for life sciences, but particularly with the developer market, and hence the reason we are here today. So to continue the process, what we've envisioned is a development group referred to as New York Builds Bio. And this would be an organization that would continue the legacy of what we started today with keeping this community of life sciences and the development community working together to continue the process of raising the awareness and raising the standards for which biodevelopment could continue on in New York City. So the idea would be to set up the organization. It would be membership driven. The mission, and I'm going to read this because again I don't want to screw it up. The mission that we've sort of started out with is that New York City Builds Bio is to educate and increase the visibility of the commercial life sciences opportunities to New York City's real estate development community and the burgeoning life science community to expand upon life science real estate development through research, reports, and educational programs. And one of the things that, I think we had a very successful symposium today. I believe that everyone that participated and was here to witness got something out of it. Part of what we want to do to continue this process is seek your feedback and get your ideas of how we could continue this process in a meaningful way so that we can promote the industry on a continuous basis. And do you want me to continue, or nobody wants to hear me talk?
That's a good introduction.
You're very good.
So just
Don't we think he's good? He's very good.
Yes.
41 years of practice.
So
But-
just some of the activities that could be involved in what you were saying, those three big buckets of research, reports, and programming. First, building a brand for the city. We really need to have a brand for real estate and life sciences that's recognizable and exciting and inspires. We heard an artist talk this morning about really how biology inspires her work, and her work is all about constructing these huge lighting installations, which is very similar to what we're talking about with life science real estate, but also to have a very vibrant online conversation that people can participate in, newsletters, an annual schedule of events where people can tune in and find out what's happening and where they can go and socialize with each other. Develop content around white papers that, around issues that need to be addressed within the city and serve as a point of element for that. Annual symposium, quarterly speakers in both the real estate and the life sciences on topics where people need to be educated further. Seminars, really serving as a clearinghouse of information. And so that was kind of the idea.
I mean, the other thing that I would say, and I think it was exemplified by Lois's comment about the Stem Cell Foundation and all the work that was put into the building, and that the Conic, which is, a well-respected developer, doing all kinds of things from Essex Crossing to the developer of 111 8th Avenue, didn't believe that there was necessarily enough interest to justify the risk. And we talked about, time and money, the risk, and Chris said the same thing, with respect to making the additional investment in the building in order to attract other tenants. So they finished, they have created a great space, a great use for the portion of the building, and then they decided to reinvest in the building to do, 3 or 4 additional floors, which could have been done at a much more cost-effective basis if they had had enough confidence in the size of the community and the amount of demand that there would be for the bioscience space. So it seems to me that one of the things that this could do would be to bring together both the development community and the life sciences community, so there's more communication about what the needs are and what the development community could be doing in order to satisfy those needs, and make New York a focus for that community. I mean, the development community in New York, as Mr. Gilbert as well knows, is one of the most sophisticated communities, in the country and the world, and the ability to try and attract the best of the life sciences industry to New York, and the city and state have kind of made themselves evidence their interest in wanting to support those initiatives, so we can help bring all those people together in order to make New York what it should be in terms of that portion of the industry.
Yeah, John, if I could just throw something in there. I co-chair the Real Estate Board Technology Committee, and we've had a lot of conversation about biotech. And what I would suggest that, and clearly working with the Real Estate Board, is let's create a database of buildings that could become life science buildings. It's clear, just like in the telecom days, we can look out the window here. We are in telco heaven. We've got 32 Thomas, 32 Avenue Americas, 111 8th, and 60 Hudson. More terabits of data running through this neighborhood than I think any other neighborhood other than Hawaii, but that's Pan-Pacific fiber. To really focus on identifying buildings that could become, with proper ownership, but that have the bones for life science, and really identify those neighborhoods and those buildings where ultimately we could make that match and bring those two communities together.
I thought you'd already done that for the Rudin organization.
My team out there is clapping, so they're...
Agreed. I mean, that's really what we started to do when Heinz asked us to work with them, is to evaluate their portfolio as to what specific buildings, could work for them. And every building is going to be different, obviously, but the first one we evaluated had a minimum number of square feet which needed to be developed in order to make it financially feasible. But once you reach that threshold, it was a home run when you're basically compared to office space, life science versus office.
I mean, I think what I'd say is I've also talked to lots of members of the development community, and one of the stumbling blocks has been that the significant investment in infrastructure that you need to do for a life sciences building as opposed to even a first class, Class A building. And I think making that connection so that there's a better understanding of the depth of the community that's available and that can justify making that investment is really important, both for the development community and for the lending community, because the lending community is going to have to underwrite it to determine that, in fact, they're going to justify making a loan as a life sciences building as opposed to an ordinary office building.
I think Mitch has a great answer to that in terms of making the staged investment.
Exactly right. So Chris Horch touched on the last panel, and you can bridge the gap by making scalable investments. So when you make the decision up front that you want to be able to accommodate a different occupancy type, in this case life sciences, the question is, what's the incremental minimum investment you have to make? So you oversize the condenser water riser. You don't need to put in all the capacity. You don't need to put in the cooling towers. Just what you want to do is plan so that in the future, should that tenant come to fruition and that occupancy come to fruition, that you have the ability and the plan to expand, but don't invest up front for all the capital, because you just don't need to. But the most important thing is planning. And if that's something that the building and the landlord thinks they should do, The time to invest is when you're making that initial investment. Don't do it twice.
So that means they need to have the right mechanical, electrical engineer and the right architect.
It never hurts to have the right team up front.
I would say that it needs to be an interdisciplinary team, and you heard Kent say this earlier, that the amount of things that are going on. You were negotiating 3 leases. He was doing conceptual design for 3 buildings. We were, visiting instrumentation companies. I mean, there's a whole level of layers of things that are going on when you're building out a facility like this or even planning for it. And so it is really important to have a Hunter Roberts perspective, on how am I going to get stuff, construction equipment up the building and things like that, involved in the conversation right from the beginning. It helps you avoid a lot of mistakes. I'm sure you've experienced this before, Jim, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, Mitch hit on it, right? It's the economical ones that we can put in the bones, call it, right? So it's the lines, it's the vertical lines that are going to inhibit the other tenants that are in there. And when to put the piece of equipment on later on, yes, it's a cost. It's not a great initial cost for the landlord, but it's the cost of the tenant work. So I mean, that's the smart way to do it. I tell you, one of the things that I learned here today, I thought that there's another opportunity besides focusing on the real estate, right? I heard Tommy Craig of Hines brought it up that. What about, right, like we're here at J-Labs, they're part of Johnson & Johnson. What about all of the pharmaceuticals that existed that were huge in New Jersey, whose market has shrunk down over there, that's got that workforce that's out there? But what about partnering with them to come in and make an investment with a landlord in here to really create that incubator space that's needed here? I think that's a huge potential.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we should get the farmers involved, no question. John, did you have something?
I was just going to add, I think one of the more important things is to continue to maintain visibility with the city and the state, to make sure, because one of the biggest hurdles, and you've heard it a number of times today, is the financial hurdle, right? The initial investment, and to be able to they've begun to incentivize the industry in the city and the state, and to make sure that they continue that support, so that the landlords and owners feel incentivized to make those investments, because it is a little bit more challenging in the urban environment than it is in other environments around the United States right now. And maintaining that support in the city is going to be key.
Right.
Well, we've got a partner in EDC that's got $500 million laying on a table right now for a developer and an academic partner, right? I mean, there's a couple quirks in that RFP.
Oh, yeah, there's that.
That's just for wordsmithing, John.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that I've also had, biotech companies bioscience companies from outside New York who are looking where they're going to locate particular facilities or where they're going to expand, and whether or not New York is user-friendly enough and has sufficient incentives to induce them to come here as opposed to going someplace else where they have choices about where they're going to locate is important. So staying on top of our governmental representatives in terms of what they're doing and how they allocate the cash and how they make it available, and the ease of the process of getting those monies available, I think is important to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but certainly the fact that the EDC has stepped up to the plate with the RFEI that they issued is clear direction to everyone, both in the city and outside, that they are here to play a serious game. And it's incumbent upon all of us to step up to the plate as well and make sure that we coordinate our efforts and take advantage of that. I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's also the fact that they have shown such expressed interest in making New York City the next bio capital of the world. And we're all here to help.
That's right. Any ideas from the audience?
I think there's a question right there. Please.
Hi, my name's Nicole McKnight. I'm Managing Director of Biolabs New York and Head of Biolabs at NYU Langone. I just wanted to echo a lot of things that have come up today, but just to reiterate that between J-Labs and Launch Labs and Biolabs, we have solved the problem of incubator space. We call it co-working space, but space for companies that are 1 to 12 employees large. They come into our space, they're fully set up to start doing their experiments, they're spinning out of our amazing academic research institutions, and they are going to very quickly meet their scientific milestones, gain more venture capital investment, and grow beyond what we can hold at capacity in our facility. this happens on average in our 9 facilities across the country in 15 to 18 months. So I just want to really light a fire and say that this needs to be happening like right now, or actually a year and a half ago, because you
Now
are
you
going.
sound like Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, Nancy and I, I'm doing exactly what Nancy did with the Genome Center. We've been on a similar roller coaster, and we share a lot of stories. But yeah, I, again, just want to reiterate, we're kind of beyond if you build it, they will come. These are companies that are, you can meet with them now, and they are out there looking for large space. Biolabs has developed a model where we can hold on to them in a graduation space sort of model, where we have larger private lab suites that have lab and office, and they still share some facilities. But that's only, we can only help like 6 or 7 companies that graduate from our space. So I will just be the kind of voice for this is imminent, and I've talked to a lot of developers in this room too, and I've been saying the same thing for 3 years. So I just wanted to say the time is now, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to talk to you about what our journey has been to get 50,000 square feet at 180 Varick Street.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you for persevering. I
Yeah.
know that journey's been a long one.
Yep.
So, Nancy, I think you hit on a point. I think New York City needs a brand for the life science, and I was struck by one of the panels. They made the point that life science, what's unique in New York, maybe a bit different than Boston and other places, is the combination of life science, design, and industry. So I think that could be part of the brand. And I also think you could, some might argue this, but you could say New York created live, work, and play. I mean, that's what New York's about. So if you combine those two, I think we can wordsmith into it a great brand that would
That's
be
a great
successful.
idea. You guys like that?
We do. Respect rights to Steve Gifford.
I think it's important, too, for the property owners who are in the room. You know, biotech, back in the day, I remember being up in Boston and looking at all the fastest companies that were, you know, fastest growing companies, and the #1 company by far had a funny name. I said, well, what does that company do? And they said they breed mice. And the mice are then used for experiments. What's happening now in terms of the modeling and the ability to use computing power ultimately to cut the wet lab processes, that time frame much shorter, is absolutely amazing. And so in terms of part of the branding, I think it's not only live, play, work, but it's also connect. It's the ability to get those big pipes and then ultimately attach really, really intelligent software to those big pipes. So if there's any type of collaborative computing going on, whether it's in the United States or the other side of the world, that we've got those pipes that ultimately can connect us all. So if you accept that amendment, I'll offer it up. There you go. Anybody else? Well, on behalf of the steering committee, unless anybody else has anything to add, thank you all. It's been an amazing day, and I hope everybody enjoyed it.